All right. Well, this is brown bag session about Cookiecutter templates and why I think they're awesome. And we'll talk about two templates that I made, one for Ruby and one for Go. And let me share my slides and screen. All right. I think it was, oh, dang it. Slide. No, I don't remember where it is. Oh, this is embarrassing. View, present. There we go. Yes. All right. I did not use my command line one. I wanted to include images, and yeah, do not have an easy way to do that yet. All right, so Cookiecutter templates. Cookiecutter templates are about project creation. So if you think about it, there's a lot of decisions that go into creating a project. If you're making it from scratch every time, you have to have an answer to these questions. You need to decide the language, framework, test setup, how you're doing CI, what you want to agree on for versioning, linting, if you're going to do a change log, the license, how to let people contribute to it, how you're going to do logging. And this is just a very small sample of what decisions you have to make. A lot of people, if you are more experienced than someone just learning how to program, you've already kind of solidified these answers in your mind. But you still have to address the question, like, am I going to do this? Yes, I'm going to do it this way. So you're still making the decision every single time you create the project. And that's just for one person creating it. If we've got 10 people creating the same type of project, they're going to do it 10 different ways. And this is where policies and everything come in. But project templates give us a way to codify those policies and best practices into default setups. So that way, if anybody needs a new project that looks like X, they can just create one from the template that has all of our best practices and everything that the team had decided is the way we want to do it baked into it. So we don't have to make those decisions, and you get a project that works with CI, has unit tests, has everything we need out of the box. One of the other benefits is a centralized location for policies. It's a little different than just having a project template. You can have your created or generated project reference policies inside the template project. And with GitLab CI.yaml, you can easily do that. So say, for example, we want to change the line length on Rubocop, right? Then we can change it in one spot and all Ruby projects would be updated with that new setting. So there's pros and cons to it. To me, it's mostly pros though. Again, this should be make the default setup work out of the box as simply as possible. All right, so my favorite project templating tool is called Cookiecutter. And Cookiecutter is a project templating tool that uses a templating engine to parameterize file contents and directory and file names. It is a Python project, so you install with pip install Cookiecutter. And here is, wow, this GIF did not, okay, I guess it is starting from the beginning. This is a recording of me using Cookiecutter. And the slides don't have a way for me to pause it and watch it from the beginning, so we'll let it loop around again. For brevity's sake, I cloned the template projects into this templates directory. You can use Cookiecutter directly on Git URL. So git at gitlab.com : the project path. And so this is part of Cookiecutter where it prompts you for the different values to configure the project. And this is totally configurable by the creator of the project template. Yeah, so it created a brand new Ruby project that has unit tests with RSpec parameterize, and simplecov all wired up, as well as GitLab CI.yaml that references an includable YAML file inside of the template project itself. So generally speaking, Cookiecutter templates or projects have the layout below or in this image. So example template, that's just the main folder for the project. Everything within cookiecutter.project name, that is what becomes the generated project. And cookiecutter.json is where you define the fields that you need set by the user. Yeah, cookiecutter.json defines the template parameters. You can turn off prompting the user if you say -- no input, and that just uses the default values. And you can reference Cookiecutter template parameters anywhere throughout the generated project, in file names and file contents, using normal template syntax. It should look pretty familiar. It also allows for some advanced usage. The templates I made didn't need to have this advanced usage. If I was going to have a namespace Python library, and I wanted to have one template that was optionally namespaced or just a normal Python module or package, then I could use a post creation hook to change things around depending on the options that the user set. I've actually never used the pre one, but there are pre hooks as well. All right, so if we are going to be maintaining project templates, we should also have tests that the templates work. And this is a very interesting thing to me. I've done this a different way before, but part of the project template itself is the GitLab CI.yaml. You want to make sure that that works. If it doesn't work, then the template isn't fully functional, even if the individual tests pass on the project. So since we all work here at GitLab, I figured everyone would want to know or would be interested in this. The way this works is the template project itself is split up into two main stages. The first stage generates the project using Cookiecutter, and it spits it out into a directory, or it names a project test project, and then it overrides the GitLab CI.yaml in the test project with the YAML that it includes. The normal YAML inside the test project, all it does is include the base YAML. So we're just going to go ahead and set that as the core YAML for that project. It simplifies the next step. And then we also need to replace a variable with the current branch name. And the generated project needs to be set as an artifact so that we can pull it down later. And then it starts getting a bit trickier. So this is the next stage, the test stage. We trigger the generated YAML, the GitLab CI.yaml within the test project, and we tell it, it uses the test project GitLab CI.yaml from the Cookiecutter gen job, which was the previous one. And we set a few variables. Template tests, we set that to true, and template test path to test project. And that comes into play on the next step. So we create the child pipeline, we set template test to true and template test path to the location of the generated artifacts. And I did not include a screenshot of that. Here. All right, here we go. So this is where that comes into play. So a before script is defined for all dev jobs in the included YAML. So we've got Rubocop, RSpec, and this template test setup. Template test setup only runs if template test exists. If it doesn't exist, it doesn't run. So in the normal use case, it doesn't run at all. But for template testing, we turn that on, and then this job pulls in the artifacts from the parent pipeline and exposes it so that we can use it, the generated code, in these projects or in these jobs. And setting the template test path is required. so that we can change directories into those build artifacts before we run Rubocop and RSpec. So yeah, it's a couple hoops to jump through, but once those are in place, then it all works. Oh, and the needs feature in GitLab CI.yaml is how we pull in artifacts from a different pipeline.
Yeah, I was just wondering because I think it was on the previous slide, you showed the execution of the Ruby test. So this was for like a Ruby template, I suppose, right?
Yes,
like
yeah. This one is specifically for Ruby template, yeah.
So this would look different depending on what the target would be for your cookie cutter templates, right? So you would have different, or
a little bit, not too much. Here, I can show. Here, I'm going to finish explaining this part, and then I'll show the Ruby and Go included YAML side by side. They're nearly identical, minus the specific linting and testing steps or jobs. All right, so now that we've got the generated project artifact pulled into the child pipeline, then we can run the test like normal on the generated code. So we're doing a full test of the generated project, including its GitLab CI.yaml, which I thought was pretty crazy. Now the needs field doesn't work correctly on non-default branches. So if you make a merge request on the project template project itself, so say the Ruby template, I want to make a few changes. I've got a merge request, it runs the pipeline. For some reason, the needs field doesn't pull in artifacts correctly if it's not the default branch. And I haven't opened the issue yet, but I need to open an issue on GitLab itself. I'm pretty sure it's supposed to work. There is actually an example in the documentation, which is this one. It's nearly identical to what we're doing. Yeah, and so anyways, it doesn't work and we need it to work. Let's full screen again. All right, and this is the resulting pipeline. Here we generate the new project, and then we trigger a new pipeline from the generated CI.yaml, and this is the triggered pipeline. Whoops. And you can tell, or you can see here, it also includes our SAST CI template, as well as the RSpec and Rubocop templates that are part of the template itself. And I've created Ruby and Go templates, and they each have unit tests, centralized base YAML, and they conform with the GitLab repository section of the handbook, minus the project-specific setup that you have to do on the GitLab settings. I don't think you can expose that or control that through files within the repository. But yeah, that is about it. I was going to show a live demo, but before we do that, since it's just you and me, Julian, I'm going to, so on the left, this is the, whoops, I don't want to split in TMUX. This is the Ruby base YAML. All of this here is from the engineering repository's default workflow from the handbook. And everything down to here is nearly identical in the Go project. So Go CI includes base YAML. There we go. So we changed the image, and Ruby has different way of installing dependencies. Besides that, we point it at a different project to pull in the parent pipeline's build artifacts, and then it's just actual testing code that's different.
Oh yeah, that's pretty neat. And the actual templates, do you also have a short sample?
Yeah.
Of that?
Let's see.
That's just interesting to see.
Here we go. And that's it.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Yeah. and like I was saying before, it's the way I think about it is that this should work for your default project, or what might be the most common type of project. You can always customize it, add new jobs and everything, but for basic testing, linting, including SAST, it does all that out of the box. So yeah, that's about it. Oh, and here's a live demo. So Cookiecutter, I mentioned you have to pip install Cookiecutter. Python also has a really cool utility, pipx. You have to pip install pipx, but pipx exposes CLI applications via their own virtual environment. So if you do pip install pipx, probably sudo pip install pipx, it'll install it on your system, and then you can say pip x install Cookiecutter. And then I've already installed it, but every time I run Cookiecutter, it uses Cookiecutter's own specific virtual environment without me having to activate it or anything. So that's my favorite way to use Python CLI applications. All right, so Cookiecutter git at gitlab.com, or this is so long. Vulnerability research templates ruby.git. Here we go. Sure, re-download it. Sample Ruby project, and that's default. Code owner is me. That updates the code owner's file. This goes into the default issues template. So I'm also going to change that to DevOps secure group vulnerability research, and yeah, that'll be good. And then I can choose what type of license to use as well. So I'm going to say GitLab EE, and there we go. And it creates it at whatever the new project name is. So if you remember in the template project itself, you have a cookiecutter.project name directory. That gets replaced with whatever the project name is, and that ends up becoming the generated project. So here, since I set the project name to a sample Ruby project, that's the directory we have. So I should be able to say bundler install, but I've already installed all the dependencies globally. And then rspec spec. Yay, it's working. And then rubocops. No rubocop errors, nothing. And yeah, it's a super basic library project in Ruby. It doesn't do anything. It just adds 2 numbers, but sets up some tests. And also I always have to look up how to do this, so I included this in here. Parameterized tests. This is with rspec parameterized. Yeah, now there's an example in there, and you can use it out of the box. But yeah, so that is about it. And here is the GitLab CI.yaml. Again, just references the base YAML inside the template itself.
Yeah. That's really cool. I think that can really relieve developers of the burden of configuring things. You only have to run the command line tool to set everything up. For example, enabling the security dashboard, like features like dependency scanning, for example, it would be just like running the tool and would you like to enable it? Yes, and then it's there. Instead of like going to the handbook or to documentation, figuring out which template to include and then doing it manually, you could just use this tool, which is really neat. I'm wondering, I never used Cookiecutter, but is it also possible to apply changes on a given project? Let's say you would like to change the license or you would like to change the name of the project, to apply change and then this change gets applied like throughout the whole project. Is this possible with Cookiecutter too, or is it usually just to get things started initially, to get the directory structure and everything set up, and then not really to change it, more to set everything up?
Yeah, it's mostly just for setup. It's Yeah, it's mostly just for setup. I haven't seen any project templating tools that allow you to mm, update it based on the changes in the template. Um, I could see some things being possible with it, I guess. But hmm, I bet you could do some interesting things with Git history. If you record the initial commit after you created the project, then you could track the changes of both projects and then kind of apply them on top of each other. I wouldn't always, you'd have to, you might have to be able to say, ignore these whole sections, right? Ignore the actual source code, only operate on these files or something. Uh, yeah. So like the license, for example, that would be an interesting one. Oh,
Yeah, yeah, and
and
also Git GitLab configuration flags. I think that's always not handy if you can just
yeah.
disable and enable stuff.
So I have
Like,
done let's see, in a different job, I made a whole set of project templates. We started using them a lot, but there was still, instead of taking like 3-4 days to get a project up and running, it was only on the scale of like 20 minutes because you'd have to still create the project in GitLab, initialize it with Cookiecutter, and then go in and update all the settings inside the project. I had, so we made a tool. uh, I kind of really miss the tool. We made a tool that automated GitLab using its API, and then it it was written in Python, and you could use Cookiecutter directly. So you created the repository directly in GitLab, cloned the empty repository, created a Cookiecutter template directly on top of it, pushed it all up, and then we also had configuration YAML files for all the different project settings that you could set. And so we could say, okay, like project creator, create new project using the default project settings. And then it would go in and, turn on merged trains, only merge when all threads are resolved. This is the default branch, add these badges to the project. Yeah, and then those settings were stored separately in a publicly accessible project on our GitLab instance. And then so when you run the tool, it pulls down the latest settings and then uses those to create the project. And yeah, then everything was all templatized. And yeah, then we had absolutely complete 100% projects up and running in like 30 seconds. It was amazing. Yeah.
and it sounds really really cool. I uh, I'm just wondering because Isaac he's been working with OpenAPI at least for the vulnerable app generation. What would you say are the differences between OpenAPI and most probably Cookiecutter is more low level, I suppose, right? So that you more like on that you can manipulate or create like your project based on text file templates, and OpenAPI maybe more high level, but I don't know. I just guessing.
Yeah,
So
so OpenAPI defines this a JSON schema basically for defining API endpoints. And then the OpenAPI generator, I think it's still called Swagger Code Gen, it generates project structures based on the defined endpoints. So it's kind of, it still creates projects, but it has a different goal. It's not so much to take user input, it's just to create a project that has the defined endpoints.
makes sense. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for our use case, yeah, that makes sense. So Cookiecutter is much more, yeah, fits much more into our use case than I think. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
cool. And for like how's this called, like variation management, or how do they call it? If let's say you would like to use a different testing library or something like that, it's most probably just a condition that you have to add inside the templates, right, to check for that,
Yep.
and then you can, yeah.
Exactly. Yep. That's exactly it. And I I think you can use conditional. So I'm using conditionals right now on the license file. So if you, here, I think we are in the, yeah, the Ruby one. Files, cookie cutter. So here's a cookiecutter.json. If you remember, I was prompted or to choose from one of the options, MIT or GitLab EE. And so if we look in the license file inside the project, here's some templating conditionals. So if cookiecutter.license is MIT, do this one. Otherwise, do that one. I think you can do the same thing on directory names or directories. Or if you turn on a flag, or if a flag equals something, then it will create the directory or not. I've never tried it. I'm pretty sure it will work though.
Yeah, that's cool. I like it very much. It's it also fits kind of into the discussion that that we I think like 2 or 3 weeks ago I read the discussion about the having a common like approach for having a change log
Yeah.
and to like treat our GitLab projects in a common way, and using this approach I think sounds very clean to me, that we have like common set of templates and everybody's using them, at least for the secure stage. That would be great.
Yeah, well, and to me, it's only win-win, even if nobody wants to use it, because I made it for me. I'm tired of setting up projects and making it be in line with our, engineering guidelines and going through and checking all the boxes and okay, add the RSpecs, copy and spec helper, or like run RSpec init, and oh, don't forget simple cov and all these other things. Yeah, so now I'm going to be using it very heavily, and if other people use it too, then awesome. Yeah, I'm hoping other people will like it though, and then I would want to move it out of vulnerability research and put it a little more high level, maybe just within secure or something. Um, it'd be awesome if it was GitLab org/templates, but and actually that is kind of an interesting point. GitLab does have templates. So if I go into GitLab and say I make a new project, create from template, it doesn't, there's not a lot of, okay, I'm saying there's not a lot of options, but there's kind of not a lot of options, even though there's a big list. Like there's no Python, there's no, this is only for Go microservices, like that's extremely specific. But all this does is just copy it initializes your repository with the template project, and it doesn't give you a chance to configure it or anything. So you still have to go in, add your author everywhere, add the license, add, set it up how you want. There's still a large amount of configuration, like tests.
Yeah, having like the possibility to like pick a high level project and then to configure it more specifically seems to be very much nicer, I think, than just like having a static project where just files are generated, or the directory structure, and that's it. Also, I'm wondering if, because you have like this command line tool that allows you to pick different options. I think that fits much more into the typical development workflow too, I suppose.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's nice if you can go to the UI and select a template. But for me, I think I would prefer, because at the beginning, especially, there's also like maybe trial and error. So you're setting up a new Git project, and you want to select a certain configuration, and then you realize, oh no, maybe a different configuration is better, and you roll back, and then so yeah, having a command line tool is super cool, I think. And
Well,
the
and
templates,
it's being able to. So there's another aspect of this too, is deployment. We don't really do too much of that internally at GitLab, but at previous companies, I have done that like very heavily, where we have our internal Docker registry and PyPI registry. And then all of the deployment was baked into the template as well. And then what that did was it like literally within a minute, you could have a fully already published project fully deployed without having to do any setup besides just run a CLI app. And once we had that, we found it made concepts like inner source more accessible, because then it lowered the bar dramatically for the effort it took to make something available to somebody else. So we started pulling libraries, common libraries, out of projects where code was duplicated, like a common logging library. We would say, okay, well, let's just, it only takes like 30 seconds to spin up a new project that's fully deployed and importable by other projects. So just make a new login one, shove all the logging code in there, update some tests, and then start using it within like 10 minutes or something. So refactoring across multiple projects became very easy. And yeah, anyways, I probably talk about it too much. I'm a huge fan of templates and automating. There's so much tedium in setting up projects and getting them to where you want them to be. And it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, that makes sense, I think. And for if you have a monorepo, let's say, where you have let's say different languages together in one repository, this would be a different template, I suppose. Or can you also like put them or combine them in different ways?
Yeah, so you could combine them if you want. So let's say you have a mono repo and it's got like a whole subdirectory full of Ruby code and another one full of like Go and then Python. So Cookiecutter doesn't care about Git. All it does is create the directories. And so you can set up to be however you want. Yeah, and I think there's options to say don't, where you can insert it into a directory. Or it's like if there's existing directories, you can update them with new files instead of having it be clean, I think. I'm not too sure on that one. Let's see, override if exists. Yeah, you might be able to do that. I'm not sure though. But yeah, it's oh, that's right. And I think once you have used the, oh, my screen got really dark. There we go. What? There. Once you have cloned a template once through Cookiecutter, you don't have to use the full path, I believe. So if I go back here, Cookiecutter Ruby. Yep. Yeah, because
Cool.
So I did this full one. It knows the project name is actually just Ruby. And then so I can do Cookiecutter Ruby and just make a new Ruby project referencing that one. And these are all stored in your home directory under, I think, .cookiecutter something.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's really cool. Oh. And the is there still like is the repository, the templates top level repository available under GitLab for GitLab, or is it already taken?
Oh,
that would be like
I don't know.
templates.
Oh, you mean just like gitlab.com / templates?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh gosh, I have no idea. We'll see. It is taken.
Yeah.
You call it a...
That would be perfect. Maybe scaffolding is not templating. A template would be the nicest name, I suppose. Because yeah. I mean, under security products, that would be still too specific for security. So this is like would be a very general, useful tool. Or
there's not under GitLab org. There's not templates, but that I don't know. I would be very hesitant to put it at that level, because we do have a separate templates piece of the GitLab product. You know, it's a subdirectory under GitLab, but I think actually I don't remember where it is. I found it once. It's in there somewhere. I'm not. Uh, there it is. GitLab org project templates. Here we go. Share. These are all of the ones you can choose from when you create a new project from a template.
Yeah.
So it would be, I think it'd be awesome to go through and try and make a merge request to use Cookiecutter for the templating and expose all the fields to the user. It's like, okay, choose, create this from a template, but it's a Cookiecutter template, and then it shows you all the fields, runs Cookiecutter to generate it, and then uses it on your project. I think that'd be a massive win.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, there's a lot around templates within GitLab that are.
Yeah, but I mean, these project templates, they are also, I guess, very similar to the first ones that we had, like static, like just a static directory structure that contains some files to get an initial setup, but
Yeah.
it's not parameterized, I suppose, right? Not very generic.
Yeah. Yep. And you still have to go through, update things, and I don't think you can even define your own templates in GitLab right now. So then if you say create a new project from a template, it has to be one of the built-in ones. I don't think you can do it from, which makes sense, I guess, because the current way we're doing templates, they are just copying the projects. They're almost just forks, right? So if you, different way would be to just fork a project if you didn't care about parameterizing things. Or I don't know if you can clone one. Anyways, yeah, there's not a way to do parameterized templates in GitLab.
Yeah, that's true. That would be great to like have a collection of very simple Git repository for each kind of configuration you could think about. But there would be a lot of Git repositories, I think, because there's like exponential blow up of combinations that you can have between different licenses, testing libraries, and everything. So it's much better if you can use some sort of
let's see,
feature generator.
One of the other ones I've done with Cookiecutter in the past was, say, at the time I was doing a lot with Flask, and so I had a basic Flask Python template, and then I had one that was like Flask plus Flask admin. Those were two totally separate ones. But then for each of those, I made a new Cookiecutter template that had either Flask admin, the Flask admin template, or the Flask, the normal Flask template as submodules, and then it would initialize the, or then it shoved each of those into a Docker container and published the Docker container to the registry. So it added additional build steps and published the container to our internal registry. So it works with submodules too. Yeah, which is really interesting.
Yeah, that's really cool. I like this tool. I didn't know about Cookiecutter. I used Ginger in the past for but only for templating, but I really like this tool. So it seems to be very, very powerful. And,
it's fantastic. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, and having a common set of templates is I think something that's really useful to all of us. If you like have some repository where we store the templates that are commonly used for like across the Curo, especially since we have now these also these guidelines, for example, CI guidelines that are very specific about what we should use, or what features we should use in our CI configuration, and which features are deprecated and will be deprecated soon. So we don't have to like dig this up in the configuration. We can just use the most recent templates and check them out.
That's exactly right, man. I was going to bring that up. I'm glad you did. Recently, we had to change get rid of all of the only and except. And if everything was using, or most projects were using centralized, YAML that you could include from a template, you update it in one spot, and that's it. So another example of that, at a different job I was at, the engineering team, for a while we wanted shorter line lengths, but then as a group everyone decided, like, actually we want to change our line lengths, and we'd been using a system like this, and all we had to do was change. I actually did it live in the meeting. We just changed it. We made the decision. I updated the YAML for the linting. It was PHP, and yeah, it was changed immediately right there. It was awesome.
Yeah, yeah, that's really cool to have something like this, like common coding guidelines. Wow, can be modified so easily with this approach. Yeah, and um, also if you uh, let's say you're using a template that's stored in a Git repository somewhere. So Cookiecutter is like aware of the current version that you are using, so it knows that there's an update. And if you're referencing a Git, like a template that's remote, the Git
So if I
repo
give it the
somewhere.
full path, it will ask me if I want to download it again. It doesn't check if
Oh,
there's updates. It just
yeah.
says, do you want to download it again? If I use only the project name, like when I did Cookiecutter Ruby instead of git at GitLab, blah, 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 then it only used my local copy.
Makes sense, yeah. And if but you could still, let's say you writing your own template, you reference a template that's stored in the Git repository somewhere and maybe inherit from it or extend it or include it or something like that.
Let's see. So you're saying, if I make a template and then that template references another Cookiecutter template,
Yeah.
if it was a submodule, maybe. Um, I'm checking the Cookiecutter, so I'm not sure. So automatically updating, I don't know. That would actually be a fantastic. I may just make a pull request to Cookiecutter. So on here, the Cookiecutter help, there's no way to say. It would be awesome if I could say Cookiecutter update Ruby, or use the latest Ruby, right? Because it stores,
Yeah.
it does a full clone of whatever I set was the Ruby project. Cookiecutters, cd Ruby, git status. Yeah, there we go. Git remote. Yep. So it would be awesome if you could tell Cookiecutter, use the latest one and do a git pull before you actually use it. Um, Man, that's a great idea. And then that would, by default, I think you could make it do a recursive submodule update as well,
Oh, yeah.
and then it would work.
I have to start using it. I think it's really cool cool tool. Thank you very much for sharing this, and also for setting the you already set like the repository up for Ruby and for Go,
Yep.
right? So
And for Go, the
they
Go one isn't quite. It's been, I don't know, maybe a good 8 months since I've done something serious in Go besides just really small things. So it could probably be improved a bit with, like, better testing best practices or something. But it has tests. It has a basic, math module that adds two numbers and code coverage.
yeah.
I pulled a few things from the analyzer's common code base, so that it should seem roughly familiar to everyone. But
Yeah, cool. Yeah, for Go. I think that there's some like linting rules. But most probably you took them from the Commons library, right? That the
yeah,
linting rules and the stuff.
or
That's
I didn't add any linting. Is it like a separate config file or something?
I think they like this was a pretty recent change, and during the last couple of weeks, I think Adam changed something for the quality like
Oh,
checks on the but that was on the Gymnasium
so
repository. I have to check
this is
again,
all
but
I'm doing on there. So
yeah.
I'm not sure about common. Yeah, maybe there's some config file that I forgot to grab. Oh, which I actually meant to bring up. Where we go. So let's say What I've done in the past, so you could curl some publicly available, mm, like the configuration file for linting, and drop it and then use it. I don't really like that approach because it doesn't work too well with private repositories. Then you have to set up a token or hope your CI token, the CI job token, is able to fetch it. I would prefer, this is the way I usually do it. So let's say, that's GoLint. It's probably named GoLint RC or something. And then you just have it right here directly. And you might need to do, I forget what I always have to look up the YAML syntax to not interpret the whole next block.
Oh.
It's something like that.
Yeah.
And then this gets run as a whole, and then you just update your rules right here. Yeah, I've used that with a lot of success in the past. The curl one works if you know your stuff is going to be public. But yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I think, did you have more questions, Julian, or more things to talk about?
That was basically everything that I have on my mind for Cookiecutter. It was really cool, so I like this tool very much.
Yeah, pretty straightforward,
seems to be
useful, simple. Yeah.
And you know, when you're setting up something, a new project, and you're not too familiar with the language yet or the framework you're using, it's also very, very handy to get things started quickly. So usually for Ruby, for example, it's just getting the project set up, all this like directories and test infrastructure that you need at the beginning. It's quite handy. For Java too. I always get crazy setting up all these like Java test directories and build directory structure at the beginning. And if you already have something like that that can do that for you, it's just great. For Go, it's simpler. For Go, it's just you only need the initial like Go main file and you're good to go. But for Java and for Ruby, and it's a bit more involved just to get started. And really like this.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of it. So hopefully other people will watch this, and they will. Yeah. So I'm assuming people are watching it right now in the future. All right, cool. I'm going to stop recording.